Miko, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Carlos?
Doing good, man. Welcome back to another episode of Mindful Techie Tuesday.
Yes, and welcome back to you as well. As always, I'm appreciative of the work that you're doing behind the scenes and for setting us up with the in the virtual studio. So appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. It's been exciting to spend the last couple of months working on this like weekly show. This is our ninth episode.
Wow, so time is like really flying, and we've covered so much in 9 shows.
Yeah, I mean we've gone from here we are July 1st, right, or soon to be July 1st. Our first show is really talking about like how can we click reset on 2020,
Yes.
and what better folks usually kind of guide themselves with using like a start of the month or here we are the second half of the year.
Yes.
And we've covered so many things from tech distraction to digital wellness, self-care. What are we talking about today?
So we're talking about something that I'm really excited about. So one of the things that's happened during the pandemic is lots of folks have been reaching out, particularly parents, about screen time for their kids and homeschooling. So if for folks that have kids or are caregivers for small kids, they have the simultaneous role of having to work from home, but also homeschool and take care of their kids at the same time. And so it's an added challenge that's something that's new. We're experiencing what UNICEF calls, I believe, the largest homeschooling experiment than we've ever seen before, and it's estimated that more than 90% of kids around the world are outside of a physical educational space that they're going to on a daily basis.
Yep.
So I'm excited that we get to talk about this topic today.
Yeah, I mean, we ended, at least for my wife and myself and my girls, we ended the school year homeschooling, and now we're anxiously awaiting what the fall will look like to see if that will continue. So, really excited to listen in on the conversation that we're anticipating here today. So, let me go ahead and bring on Tiffany, and then maybe we can do some intros of her work and whatnot.
Hi.
Hi, Tiffany. So how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And I'll say a little bit about who you are and let you talk a little bit about who you are and what you do, and tell us how you're feeling. But want to let folks know. So this is Tiffany McDuffie, and she is an all-around awesome and extraordinary woman. So if you don't know her, you want to get to know her, you want to follow her on LinkedIn and on Instagram. But she's an author, she's a speaker, she's a corporate consultant, and she is the founder of 2 extraordinary organizations that are actually focused on the social and emotional aspects of play. So play for kids through her youth development organization, Purposeful Play, and play for women as a form of self-care through She Plays. And so I'm excited to have Tiffany join us to be a part of this conversation, specifically about parenting and screen time for kids during this COVID-19 pandemic. So again, Tiffany, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. I don't know if I could beat that introduction. I might have you repeat that. An awesome and extraordinary woman. I'll take that. So, yes, thank you for having me. I am the CEO of both Purposeful Play and She Plays. Purposeful Play focuses on children ages 5 to 13 after school and on days out of school, just giving them that social emotional lens, the ability to gain resilience and teamwork, problem solving, and critical thinking skills, those things that they must have in school, but there's no class for that. They're always on their phones and their tablets, but there's no app for that. And so we're able to deliver that programming through the lens of play and athletics in a way that makes it fun and engaging for kids. So really excited about that work. I've been doing that for about 8 years. And then through that process, learned that there was a group of people who we were leaving on the table who themselves were stressed out and needed some form of outlet and really didn't give themselves the opportunity to play, always trying to create an experience for the children. And that was moms and just other busy women professionals that had, got so focused on their titles and to-dos that they were not making time to play. And so we do the same thing, social emotional intelligence, but for women.
Awesome. Well, that's so awesome, and I'm excited to dive deeper into that. So as we get started, I want to ask you, because there's so much going on in the world right now, and I know that we were talking in the green room, you know, you have kids yourself, and this is not theoretical for you, but you're not just a service provider, like you actually are experiencing this day in and day out. So how are you dealing with, in the context of COVID, working from home, and, you know, with what's happening with Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd protests? How are you dealing?
I think I'm just, I'm taking it day by day. I'm just like everyone else. I think a lot of my parents and even my peers were thinking like, oh, Coach Chip has that, you know, she has it under control. She can just throw some games together, be easy for her. And in a way, I may have taken it for granted at first too, like, I can do this. Oh Lord, the first couple of weeks in, I was like, no, my kids were lucky or blessed to be at one of the schools that did have curriculum and programming, you know, straight from the beginning. And at first I was like very excited about that. And then by the time we were like 4 weeks in, I was like, I'm burnt out. You know, like, it's crazy. It's cool that they didn't have a break in their academics, but it definitely was challenging. Add in Black Lives Matter, the social unrest and police brutality, and it's just like another layer. So day by day, that's my short answer.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I think that's all we can do is take it day by day. So you talked a bit about the work that you're doing. Can we back up a little bit? Can you tell us like how you got started? In other words, what inspired you to get into the work that you're doing? What was your aha moment?
So, you know, it's very funny because I'm a CPA by trade. They're like, how does an accountant become, you know, like she's flipping with kids and doing cartwheels? And I think I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I had, I've journeyed many ways. I was an insurance agent. I was in real estate. And I stumbled upon just this feeling that I was never really merging my income with my impact. I made good money in all of those things, but I wasn't doing anything that I felt like helped me, my offspring, which I didn't have at the time, or like my people. And so I wanted to find a way to merge those two. And I did a short stint subbing at Milwaukee Public Schools. And in that time, I was really there because I wanted to do something in youth development, but I really didn't know what, and I didn't know what age to serve. And so I did a range of like elementary to high school and landed on that sweet spot, kind of like the 3rd to 5th grade kids, because there was no programming for them. For little kids, there's like this birth to 3, birth to 5 thing. And then for high schoolers, they're like, get ready to go to college. But in some of my studies, there's, they call those middle school years are like that hidden treasure where there's so much growth, development, and puberty and emotions and thought processes being formed, and yet there's really no programming for them. And so a lifelong lover of sport, I figured that there would be a way to merge like the after school experience and sport together to get those kids who are kind of think they're too cool for daycare yet not old enough to stay at home, to get them like involved and feeling some like joy, just like bringing back childhood. I went to schools and they're like walking in sad, walking in with an attitude, or walking in angry. You're just like, you're 10. Like, this is the time of your life, you know? And so I think that was my aha moment, looking out and looking at other programs and recognizing that they were void of a way to make it not be daycare and bring it in a way that was really intriguing to the kids, so the kids would choose it, you know, not something that they just had to do, but something that they wanted to do.
That's awesome. So, and I love what you said about, you know, the part of it was like sparking the joy and bringing back the joy to the childhood experience. You know, one of the intentions I've set for myself is to have more childlike fun and play in my life, because I remember what it was like to be that young and to not have as many things, you know, crowding your plate, and to just, you know, you're more open, you're more uninhibited, and then you grow up and then the world tries to shape you into something else. So I appreciate you for what you're doing and the work that you're doing with this organization. It's Purposeful Play, right?
Yes. It's okay. A tongue twister. We had to make it difficult.
Yeah, but I love the name though. I think there's power in that name. So that's what I will say. So Purposeful Play, and you're welcome. Purposeful Play. So I have a kid. I send them to you. They sign up for Purposeful Play. What does the experience look like for them?
So I was actually training my coaches today for summer camp, and I told them social emotional education is the curriculum of purposeful play. So then just kind of going back to what I said, how in school they're required to do all of these things, and even at home, like they're required to be leaders, to be able to make friends, know how to problem solve, know how to have resilience, keep going when they want to quit, whether it's on the basketball court or if it's a math question that they can't. They're required to be able to like have that grit and rigor to just keep going. And so in my opinion, every day at Camp Play looks like the cross between gym class, a birthday party, and a good time at your favorite auntie's house, but with very intentional programming, meaning that all of those life skills that we know that they'll need to exhibit in their classrooms, their communities, and their homes, we're just like hiding them in the games, and then like bringing them back out and showing them, oh, in this game you learned this. Now tell me where else you can use it and how else you can use it, so that they're taking it beyond camp and back to their regular everyday lives.
So let's talk about social emotional learning before we dive too much deeper into this. So that seems to be a buzzword that is being thrown around. And I think anyone could probably get hired as like an educational consultant. If you just say like, you just put social emotional in front of whatever you do, right? Like I'm a social emotional accountant. I'm a social emotional, barber, whatever it is, right? So can you talk about, when we talk about social emotional learning, particularly in the context of what you're doing, what do we actually mean?
We mean like being aware. So I recently wrote a book. It's called Blurry Brown Eyes, and the book is it's called A Kid's Book About Vision. And so kids are funny, like, does that mean he can't see? We're like, no, it doesn't mean he can't see. He's casting a vision for what he wants in his life. And so for me, social emotional education is about being very aware of yourself, being reflective. It's something when adults do vision boards every year. Tons of adults do, and we'll talk about the thoughts on those, but kids are rarely encouraged to do like a vision board where they're actually set, but they're required to have good grades. They're supposed to keep their room clean, all of these things. And so I think that what we mean at Purposeful Play is being able to be self-aware, to be reflective and kind of introspective, to figure out what they want, how they're going to get there, to be aware of their triggers. We as an adult, I hate to generalize, but adults often think that kids don't have problems. Like they don't have no bills, they don't have no stress. But it's really not true. Like they're just little humans. So they have a full range of emotions just like us, and they need to know how to cope with them. So they have the right to be angry, sad, scared, worried, fearful, happy, joyful. And with kids, they can feel, the same with adults, but kids literally will feel it all like within a 30-minute period. I felt all the things. And a lot of adults are guilty of saying like, get it together, don't cry, what you got to cry over? And so I think just being really aware of who they are, recognizing the things that do bother them, being brave enough to articulate them without being afraid that they'll be judged by it, standing up for what they believe in, I guess kind of like digging in to learn what they believe in. And not kind of just going with the crowd. You can't tell someone to be a leader without giving them the skills of leadership. And leadership isn't just like telling everybody what to do, but it's also listening. It's also recognizing that they are lifelong learners, learning that they can learn from someone that looks different from them, that's younger than them, that's older than them, a plethora of things. And then when things don't go their way, learning how to cope with it, whether it's, deep breathing, whether it's just being willing and able to talk about it, whether it's taking a run. All of my basketball players, like that is their stress relief. Yes. So knowing what your stress relief is and recognizing that you have stressors as a kid and but there are ways and tactics to overcome those things.
Okay, so thank you for demystifying that. So when we talk about social emotional learning, we're talking about self-awareness. In this context, we're talking about self-awareness for kids. So how do we actually build that so that folks our little humans, our little people have the skills to be able to recognize and navigate their emotions in the same way that we as, fully grown adults or humans are able to do that. So with that being said, there's a lot in my work that I do mostly with adult learners that has come out about what we know about the preliminary impact of COVID, as well as the exposure to what's happening in the news. So even for folks that aren't directly involved in protesting, maybe you haven't had a bad encounter with the police, but maybe you know someone who has, or maybe you're just watching the stream on social media or on the news. There is the secondary trauma that we experience from being exposed to that over and over again, right? And then there's the range of emotions and grief that we're experiencing as it relates to COVID, right? Our life before COVID has changed, right? And we're not going back to normal, no matter what reopening looks like. So we know what that looks like with adults, right? We see people are feeling more frustrated, more agitated. People are essentially going through a grieving process. So what in your experience with the kids you work with and your own children, how are they processing? Like, what can you help parents understand? Like, what might their kids be experiencing right now, even if they can't articulate that?
So I think, and I always go back in the question a little bit, but the reason that it was very seamless for me to go from purposeful play to she plays is that we are all having a human experience. Yes. A lot of what we feel, we think it's different for kids, but it's really not. They're not grieving, and unless they've lost people directly to them, they're not necessarily grieving the loss of work, but they're grieving the loss of school. And kids who originally was like, I don't want to go to school every morning, you had to drag them out the house. They're screaming like, oh my God, I miss school. They've lost their friends. They've lost kids. You know, they don't want to hear rules, but they are driven by routine. That is how they regulate themselves. So they have definitely had very similar things, just in different ways, especially single, the only children who their outlet to be communal and to come together was with other people, especially if they weren't able to like get out to see their cousins or extended family when the restrictions were really tight at the beginning. The kids who were into sports, they immediately lost that. They were also grieving the loss of sports. That's been huge in the news. And just, I think having to adapt to this new normal and now this new abnormal, the new normal being quarantine and now the new abnormal as we reintroduce ourselves, just really like treading lightly as they walk back into what they want. Even my own son, we, pulled him out of all competitive sport. And so now that AAU season is back on, he's like, Mom, I'm going. And I'm like, no, you're not. And so he is struggling with accepting that, but he's asthmatic and he's had a few flare-ups before. And so when I just get extreme and I start showing him pictures of COVID and he's like, all right, Mom, fine. But, yeah.
So let's talk about how, let's stick with purposeful play. So with, the work you do with kids, how has that evolved in light of what's happening with COVID?
So we were actually open from the entire month we were open until May 1st. So we continued programming, but you definitely saw parents pulling back. If they didn't have to work, they kept their kids at home. We really only had the children of essential workers. The idea of kids, keeping on a mask when we didn't know if that was needed at first was just like a traumatic, just visually for them to do. And then of course, hard for them to just like keep on their faces. And I think that COVID, because everyone was experiencing it, wasn't as difficult to deal with as the social unrest because everyone was experiencing it. And when it came to the police brutality and social unrest, I think I saw a lot more heightened stressors because I serve a predominantly African-American population of children, and I'm always preaching, like you can be whatever you want. It doesn't matter where you come from. We all have the same opportunity, like just push through, just keep going. And then when they see someone on TV being killed over $20, they like, are you sure, Coach Tiff? For me, it's like, well, how do I change this language to not float over what's happening, but to address it and yet still let them, be respectful of people who are in authority, not think that they're absolutely going to be a victim to this, So for me, it was a challenge to make sure that my language was not dismissive and that I acknowledged, what they were seeing and how this was like a double whammy. They had to deal and adjust to COVID. And just when they thought they were coming out of that, it's like this new thing happening. And so I may have lost the question.
So I do want to pick up on this point about the language that you're using to really connect with young people. around the social unrest. But I want to clarify. So is Purposeful Play closed now?
So we just reopened. So we
Okay.
just reopened to resume summer camp program. We closed for about 30 days because we had gotten down to so few children, and we just wanted to. We implemented a bunch of things for social distancing, like how do you change sports to social distance sports. So we had to dig deep in the crates and kind of like get into some of that, as well as like thermometers and touchless hygiene, hand sanitizer, and some of the upgrades that we needed to do in the space. So we're reopened now.
Okay. And is there a virtual component in light of COVID or no?
So I weighed heavily against the virtual component only because of the screen time. We do have Camp in a Box. So kids who...
What is it again?
Camp in a Box.
Camp in a Box. Okay.
So we have 3 different experiences. We had STEM and sports, so it kind of like merged STEM and sport together. We have a varsity reader and writers club. We're actually using Amanda's journal for kids to write their own story.
Awesome.
And merge that with some physical activity as well. And then we had a kindness is cool box to kind of amplify empathy during this time. And so those things for kids whose parents were either afraid to let them come to summer camp, or if they had lost funding and so they weren't able to attend, that gave them like instructions and, there were some pre-recorded videos so they knew what to do if they needed it, but it still allowed them to take the stuff outside. They were stuck on the actual screens for homeschooling and all of that, that I applaud everyone who was able to do virtual camp, but just to be able to keep the engagement, like unless we were about to run TikTok videos all day, we're going to tap out.
so that's super helpful. And for folks that are wondering, she mentioned Amanda's book. She's talking about Amanda Miller Littlejohn. You can find her on LinkedIn or on Instagram. She has a book called Package Your Genius, which is about the branding for adults. But then there's a Package Your Child's Genius book. Is that what you're referring to?
So she has Package Your Child's Genius, but she also has a book for kids called Write Your Story.
Okay.
Where kids can write and publish their own books.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I wasn't aware of that one. Okay, so that one's there. Again, if you find Amanda, you'll be able to get access to the books, and we'll maybe, if Carlos can find the link, we'll put the link in the down below. So let's go back to the conversation that you were saying about addressing social unrest, right? So we're all having a human experience. We're having, as adults, we're having a range of emotions that we're experiencing. Our children are humans too. They're experiencing the same range of emotions, even if they might not have the same level of skill in articulating and expressing that. And that's where the work that you do comes in, right?
Absolutely.
So can you model for us maybe like what one of those conversations is like with one of the Black kids, so your Black children, as you talk about, you can be anything, but then they say, well, but Coach Tiff, I just saw this video. Like, are you sure about that? Like, how do you, like, in real plain terms for a parent that's watching this, how do you address that?
I speak very candidly. So I would say what you saw was wrong and what happened was wrong. And we talk about bullying all the time. We talk about bullying at school. We talk about, using nice words. We talk about dumping the dissing. We talk about just, being kind in your words and in your actions. And so what you saw and what the whole Black Lives Matter movement is about overcoming racism. And racism is bullying to the 100th power. Mm-hmm. And that is when someone judges you just based on the color of your skin, and they generalize, well, because you're Black, this happens, or because you're Black, you'll act that way, or because you're Black, you'll speak that way or this way. Or if you're Black and you don't speak a certain way, are you really Black? How? And so those sorts of things. Even within camp, we've seen instances of like colorism where we'll be out on a field trip and there'll be, we'll have, an array of complected Black children, and if they're all like throwing stones in somewhere they shouldn't be thrown in, you'll see the lighter skinned children, like people like, stop doing that, but the dark skinned children, they'll be like, who does this kid belong to? And so we've actually had those conversations because it's happened when we were out in public, in summers past. And so just like relaying that back to them, saying, racism is wrong. It is the ultimate sign of bullying. It can happen whether you can be racist no matter what color you are. Black people can be racist as well as white people. And just working it from the same perspective as you do any sort of bullying. It's wrong. It's not acceptable, especially people in positions of authority should not be doing it. Your life is valuable and it does matter, and you should stand up for for anybody being bullied in this instance. I'm using bullying because I'm talking to kids. We know it was far more than that, but that is a way that they can equate it to something that they see at school and talk about it all the time.
And I think that's really important. So you just gave us some really gold right there, some nice solid gold right there. So you talked about relating it to an experience that they can relate to, right? And in this instance, you used the word bullying, and you talked about how racism is sort of bullying on steroids, essentially, right? And you were really clear about this is wrong, this is not acceptable, and what you should do in response to that. So as a follow-up question, how do you is the conversation different for allies? So we have a lot of non-Black, well-intentioned allies that tune into this conversation. Is the conversation similar or the same that they have with their kids?
So I think that when this first happened, I have a ton of partners who support our programming, who are non-Black, who are allies, and also peers who are non-Black who do work in this space with predominantly Black children. Yeah. And so one thing that I've seen is that some allies were, for their own children, were looking to like shield them from it, as opposed to, and I have advised against that. Well, they don't know how to say it, or they don't want. And it is, at the end of the day, it's just a privilege to be able to shield your children from it, right? Yeah. If you really want to take meaningful action and truly be an ally, then you empower your children with the same sort of conversation. Racism is bullying on steroids. It's not okay. And I think there's an additional layer of that to let them know that there is some things that they don't have to worry about just because their skin isn't brown, and that that's not okay, and that all people should be, treated equally, and why it's important, and that they consider themselves an ally and an advocate for equality for all people, and how the kids should do the same. And so if they see instances of racism among their friends, or name calling that's inappropriate, or people are joking in a way that, wouldn't make them feel good, that they should speak up and say something. And if they're not comfortable saying it to their friends, that they should at least tell a parent so that they can step in and make a difference.
So I appreciate that. And I think that's super helpful for the audience, which is the main thing I take away from what you shared is that to always tell the truth, right? And to not shield kids from the truth. You gave examples of how you can make the language accessible, but don't shield kids from the truth, and be clear about what's right and what's wrong. Go ahead.
Because kids know, even when we think we're shielding them, whether they're Black kids or white kids, they know. They watch TV, they see friends, they have all this access to technology, they know what's going on. And so if you're not saying anything, then they're just forming their own opinions, and they're forming it in their friend groups, and you're taking away your ability to influence it, to make sure that thinking is right and within your own belief system. So thinking that you're shielding them, it's impossible. It's not really what's happening. So it's better. Really, the adults are the ones who need to be more brave. We need to be more courageous. It's a tough conversation for us more so than it is for them. And they appreciate it. If you think back to things your mom didn't talk to you about when you were a kid, I have a crazy example I won't share here, but I think about moving to a new school in Virginia and kids saying crazy things to me, and me being like, that's not true. And me really just not knowing the definition of words. You know what I mean? My mom was protecting me, really protecting ourselves. You know what I mean? And we just need to be bold and brave and talk to our kids, because they're going to get the information whether we talk about it or not.
Yeah, I think that's important. In an information saturated world, your kids are going to get access to the information. And even when it comes to consumption of media, my principle as it concerns this is I would rather have a conversation with you about what you're watching, as opposed to try to ban a whole list of thousands of things that you can't watch. Yeah. So go ahead. You want to say more about that?
I'm just going to say also, when I talked about kids being able to cast a vision, or even at the beginning of the year, if adults are doing so, if you do a family vision board where you establish family values, these are the things that we believe in. This is what happens here. This is the type of life that we want to live. Then when you get to when it's time to have these difficult conversations, it's not so hard, because whether you're talking about drug abuse or other risky adverse behavior or racism or any of the things, or sexuality, any of the hard conversations, you've already set, as a family, sat down and decided these are our values, this is what we live by. They're able to change and evolve over time, but we've set this kind of standard for how we do things. And so then it's easier to have those conversations because you're just like, and remember when we set this goal, or remember when we said we believed in this? This aligns with that. Does that align? No, then we shouldn't be doing it. And so when you're looking at the kids and what they're watching on TV, what they're consuming, like you said, I have a list of no's. All having a list of no's is going to do is make them curious to see what's in those no's. Mm-hmm. But if you already have your values aligned, you can say, you catch them watching a no, or you're monitoring what they're watching, you say like, well, does this align with what we talked about? Is it I didn't know, because we agreed at the end of the year that we were these type of people. Type of person, okay, maybe we need to adjust. And kids will like shame themselves, like, okay, no, mom, not the type of, like, and they can kind of adjust themselves. But if we don't do that, then,
So that's powerful. So that's another nugget there, right? Which is like you are enrolling your kids in the process. It's a co-creative process.
Absolutely.
And I talk about this a lot with facilitation with adult learners. I think oftentimes folks that are new to the space in that role think they have to come in, they have to know all the answers, and they have to talk the whole time. It's like, well, no, like all you need to do, this is a co-creative experience. We all have wisdom within us, right? And so we have to make space for each other to bring forth the wisdom that we are. And I think with the scenario that you provided, essentially the parent is like a facilitator of the conversation for the kid to really do their own critical thinking and reflection.
Absolutely.
And then make decisions based on that, right?
Absolutely. And that doesn't mean that we can't say like, okay, well, you're still making the wrong choice and I'm the mama, so this is what happens. But when you allow them to, like you just said, great work, co-creators in the space, everybody feels better when they feel like they have input. Everybody can buy into it more when they feel like they have input. And that is part of that social emotional learning also. When we create rules that can't play, the kids help create what the rules are. And they help create what the consequences are. And then everybody like dips their hand in paint. We all put our hands on the thing. So it's like, it's fun. It's visual. It's touchy feeling. And so when they break the rules, you'd be like, okay, well, you agreed this was a rule, that you agreed these were the consequences. So you really can't, fight about it. It's like, they're like, oh, okay. They probably thinking next time I'm going to make rules that's not so rough. Consequences that's real easy, but it's a lot easier to get the kids to buy into it when they have a voice.
That's awesome. And so I do want us to talk specifically about screen time and strategies for that. But before we do that, I want to maybe talk at a higher level about this whole concept of social emotional learning for kids and really raising awareness, self-awareness for them, right? Creating space for them to be self-aware and to be reflective. For parents that are out there watching this, what are there like one or two strategies that you have or that you would suggest as a starting point for parents that wanted to start to your point, not give them a list of no, but to start the process of helping them to reflect on their own experience. Does that make sense?
It does. I think that, and I'll pick on dads. Dads are notorious. Some dads, sports dads, are notorious to be like, I was a basketball player. My son's going to be a basketball player. I did this. My son's going to do this. And maybe moms do too. I do know moms who like we're musical. We often put our own hoop dreams or whatever we like to get off onto our kids. And so I think one of the ways that you can help kids be really self-aware is just by digging into their interest, asking them open-ended questions, helping them discover who they are personally. Like when you talk, I used to say that we help kids discover their personal passions, and adults would be like, what? But they passionate, but they really, they are. I have twin daughters, and they are night and day. If they are, I always wanted twins, and in my mind, they were going to be identical. They were going to look just alike. They were going to, pass. They're going to do it. My daughters could be. They're not identical. They never want to do the same things, and when they're at school, they barely even sit at the lunch table together. I go visit their school and separate tables, and I'm just like, sit with your sister. She's like, I have other friends. So literally allowing them to be themselves. And when and kids don't know because they're not given reflective opportunities very often, but just if you do things like write an inventory list of all the things you love. Well, what do you want to grow up, or who do you admire? Who are you watching on YouTube? What do you like about them? Because they're often drawn to things that are similar to themselves, and really just like helping them discover their personal passions separate from our own, separate from their siblings, is one way to help them be really self-aware. The other thing I would say is letting them, what we call it Camp Play, like try it on. Not saying like, okay, your brother's in basketball, so everybody's doing basketball, you know, and sometimes it's not easy. And I recognize that as a parent, you're not trying to go to like 80 million different activities. But if there is, or if you can find a space in your community, like purposeful play, but a place that does allow sampling so that kids can kind of like try an array of things to find what is their personal passion. They won't know until they try it on. So I would say just letting them try a multitude of things, not narrowing them into what your vision was for them, but letting them cast their own, and just helping them be introspective to, you know, listen to what they want. They'll tell you.
So listen to kids and help them explore their passion, not your passion, and then let them try it on. I love that. So I think you're right. I think so many of us try to live vicariously to other people. When we could just live our own life, right?
You were made to be an image of me, you know, me 2.0. No, but it's very natural. So I get it. But yeah, we got to let them be themselves, because at the end of the day, they'll either just be pretending for us or they'll resent us for it. So, and oftentimes they do mirror us, because a parent is the kid's, you know, first superhero, period. Like, you are what they want to emulate anyway, but letting them bring out their own unique intricacies and passions, and, you know, it even helps to keep you young, because they might have you trying new things. So.
Yes. So the I guess the other side of the coin for this, maybe connected to this, is helping young people recognize and process in a healthy way negative emotions. So I know it's a complicated question to get at, but is there maybe one or two things that you can give to parents watching this, and maybe in the context of, let's say, what's happening with Black Lives Matter? You know, for Black parents out there, maybe their kids are, you know, having a negative reaction, and maybe the kid doesn't even know it's a direct result of being exposed to the news about this. Like, how do you help young people, first of all, recognize that they're having a negative reaction, and then give them tools to diffuse or to redirect that?
I think just encouraging your kids to name it, you know, like name what they're feeling, and to be able to have a full range of emotions. So I'm scared, or especially boys, like they're notorious, our Black people, and again, I hate generalizing, but many Black people that I have seen, so therefore I'm not generalizing, but that I have encountered, will say to their sons, like, you know, like, toughen up, you don't need to cry, you know, like, or don't feel like this, or boys are supposed to blah, blah, blah. Like, feelings are not mutually exclusive based on gender. Like,
and that's men in general I've encountered. Like, that's how we're socialized, to toughen up. Yeah.
No, it's wrong. And so, you know, allowing them to feel giving them permission to feel a full range of emotions, and inviting them to share it with you or another trusted adult, helping them name what they're feeling, and letting them know that whatever they're feeling, it is okay, and it is human, and it is not just them. They're not isolated in that emotion, and then working through ways to deal with that emotion. You know, it's like, and my mom is super biblical, so I grew up, you know, be angry but sin not. Well, really, it's like, it doesn't, no matter what, if you can be angry, but you can't, you know, throw a brick through the window. You know? So just helping them to name those emotions, and then giving them some coping skills. Breathing deep. I remember the first time someone ever told me to breathe, I was just looking at them like, really? I mean, I'm a very athletic person, so even the thought of doing yoga, I was like, that's boring exercise for people who really don't want to move. Horrible generalization. I'm there every Saturday, and it's like the fire for my brain. So literally, whether it's breathing deep, whether it is thinking of 3 happy things. Another thing that we do with kids at camp is when they have a complaint, we make them sandwich it with 2 good things. So if this is horrible, tell me 2 things that are great, because then that helps you keep your mindset going from just like burrowing into the super negative place.
So I like that. So it's working backwards. So the complaint sandwich, I think that's something that's accessible for any parent, right? For any caregiver of young children. And then you mentioned, but then you working backwards, you mentioned sort of the skepticism around the yoga and the breathing. So what's the entry point? Like, how do you put the medicine in the, I guess, in the Gatorade or whatever you give people to like get them to try it?
So at camp, the kids sign a contract saying they'll try all the things. but so I think it's harder for adults. Kids, you can get kids to do stuff. You tell them, this is what I say: do what you got to do so you can do what you want to do. So I want you to try this, and so then if you try what I want, this is what you got to do. Then you can end up getting what you want to do. Yeah. That's probably one of the best ways. The try it on is a real big thing. I know there was some cartoon a while ago, and it's like, try it, you'll like it. I think it was like Yo Gabba Gabba trying to get kids to eat vegetables or something like that. Kids don't know what they don't like until they try it. And then I think also recognizing that the same things that help us get through the emotions are the same thing that helps them get through the emotions. So physical activity, go for a run, take a jog. There is definitely a body-brain connection with physical movement and de-stressing. You know, that's not just, we don't just say go play, it's science-based. So it's a real thing. All of the things that work for us will work for them.
So, and what I'm hearing you say is that you don't have to have a PhD in child psychology to figure this out. Like, you know, what works for you, you can figure out how to find appropriate language and experiences that connect to what young people are experiencing, and that's the starting point. So I think that's so helpful. I think we have lots, particularly I see this a lot with young educated parents where they want to read every book in the world before they try something, and so I think what you're giving us is something that's really accessible that they can just do right now. And I would add one more thing. It sounds like people have to be willing to experiment and be okay with like failing forward. Is that part of it?
Absolutely. And I mean, because there's no right or wrong to it, right? Like we have tons of cliches at camp. But so I say cliches are cliches for a reason. When people say, oh, cliche, I'm like, well, they're a cliche for a reason. We say that sometimes you win and sometimes you learn, you never lose. So if you don't get it right, then you know that didn't work right for that kid and you move on. And the other thing I was going to say is that sometimes the reason why we really struggle with helping our kids process the emotions is two things. I think we take it personally, like, oh my God, I have failed. They feel this way because I didn't know. They feel that way because they are human and they are processing something human, a human experience. Yeah. And B, we don't know how to manage our own stress.
Yes.
And so it's like, oh, okay, help them manage it how I manage mine. Well, if I manage mine by the wine, I can't, that's not going to be an outlet. If I manage mine by cussing and screaming, that's not going to be an outlet for the kids. So I think that's why it was really important for us to say, sometimes when you say social emotional education and you talk about adults are offended. Like, I'm socially emotionally educated. What do you mean? But if you're not in touch with, what causes your stress, how to overcome your stress, what you do to cope with your stress, how you get yourself going when you want to quit, how to be courageous in the face of adversity, then it kind of helps you it's an opportunity to do it with your kids. Like people who like graduate from school with their kids and you be like, oh my gosh, you went back to school all that time and they're graduating together. Like this is social emotional intelligence is something that we'll be working on until we take our last breath. And so it is a buzzword right now, but I think it is, people are so focused on the academics of things. And that was one of the things I was going to say about the homeschooling experience. I gave myself grace. I pray we don't go back into this in September. Oh my God, I don't want to be homeschooling in September. We are. I gave myself and my kids a lot of grace and balance between the academics and social emotional stuff. Like as much as we worked on math is as much as we worked on being kind. We had a gratefulness board. We woke up, you better put something on that board because in such proximity, there's going to be complaints throughout the day. My son is he's a boy. He's the only boy. Of course, my son's boy. And I have twin girls. So he'll wake up like, why don't I have a twin? Well, that's not something I can fix. I have a playmate. Well, I want my own twin. Let's go on this gratefulness board to see what you can be happy about. But I can't fix that problem. Let's call your cousin, FaceTime. So
I think, and you just dropped so many gems there. So first of all, I love the idea of the gratefulness board, right? So I think that's something that everyone can do, whether it's virtual or digital. You put one up in virtual or actually something you put on your refrigerator or in your house on the wall. I think that's just an awesome idea, really accessible. And it looks like it doesn't require any resources or little at all to do that. So I think that's awesome. Get you some Post-its and put them on the refrigerator. There you go. Gratitude board.
Yep.
So, and then the other thing you said, though, was this is really important because I find in my teaching with adult learners, reminding people that you're not responsible for other people's emotions. Yeah. And it sounds like you're saying the same thing with your kids. Like, you're not responsible for your kids' emotions. Yes, there are things you can do to help with soothing and to help with guiding them to channeling those in a constructive way, but you're not responsible for those emotions. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's so important. So in the last few moments that we have left, I do want to talk specifically about screen time. I know that you mentioned at the top of the conversation that you are really focused on making sure that your kids that you work with and your own kids are finding the balance between screen time and being out in the real world. Can you describe what that actually looks like at Purposeful Play, and what does it look like for your own kids?
So a Purposeful Play, all of our screen time is intentional. So meaning like we're based on social emotional education, but also physical literacy. So move your body. So if we have any video games, they're like the Wii video games where like your body is moving in the midst. So we're accomplishing both things. And then if we're watching movies, then they are intrinsically tied to whatever piece of social emotional education we're trying to give. Like they're tied to resilience, or they're tied to grit, or they're tied to overcoming things that seem insurmountable. And so that programming is just very, very intentional. We do let the kids do TikToks because it's like you can't take all the things from them, right? But TikToks are fun, so then we all do it, and then the coaches get to do it, and then they think we can't dance. So just making it fun in that way is something that's been really successful at camp. And then we also at camp have them make their own like playlist, clean versions only. They can then go in and like they're experimenting with tech, they're on Spotify, they're making a playlist. So in the morning when they're hearing the stuff play, they're like on it again. That's that co-creator space. I was gonna say one more thing and I lost my train of thought. We had early on, because we do all of this sports stuff, kids would do like major trash talking about each other's games. He can't play, he can't dunk, he can't shoot, he's an O for all these things. So we made them podcasts. So they like record their own shows where they like commentate positive feedback, or like you get to be Charles Barkley or Shaq or whomever.
I love it.
Say it, but you're saying in a way that's constructive. You're actually talking about the plays, not the person. And so that has been a really cool way to also have some tech, but, and then they get to hear their voices back, and they've never done that before. So that part is really cool. At home, I just shame my kids when I can't. I'm like, your mother is you're making me look bad. No, just teasing. I
was like, that's not very socially, emotionally inclined, is it?
No, it's not. But I will admit that I do say that doesn't work. So we're clear that when I say that, they like, that's your job. That has anything to do with us. We watching Maggie and whoever they're watching. But I definitely just try to ensure my middle child is a TV screen head. She's addicted to tablets and technology. And so I have to literally like pull her Sky. Okay, we set a schedule. And as long as we do this much physical activity, then we're going to get this much screen time. And when you again set that expectation and that limitation, then they're okay with it. It's kind of like when you have no boundary set, when you set rules for how it should happen, and then you try to snatch it away, well, then it's a problem. But if they know what to expect, they may not like it, but the ground rules have been set. And then explaining why those rules exist, why we watch certain things, why we don't watch certain things over. So I want to say one more thing, but sometimes I feel like I go too long. Can I say one more thing?
Go.
So my kids were born 2 days apart. Like their birthdays on the 20th and the 22nd of June, although 3 years. But anyway, so they had this joint birthday party a few weeks ago or last week, and their older cousin is over, and he convinces them to watch a scary movie. My kids never watch scary movies. They'll scream all night. They're going to have nightmares, do all the things. And so my daughter was like, we don't watch those shows because we'll have nightmares. And you shouldn't put negative thoughts in your head. And yes, she's listening, like somebody is listening to me. So honestly, when you're explaining to them like why they shouldn't watch things, they get to advocate for themselves, like, I don't do this and this is why I don't do this. So often adults don't want to explain the why to kids, but if you want it to stick, you got to make it mean something to them. And so, they kind of understand their boundaries and they know when they're crossing them. Doesn't mean they never cross them, but it absolutely means that it's much easier to pull them back.
I love the idea. So I love that what you talk about explaining the why. But I also love what you talked about at the beginning of your response, which was that you are giving kids a tool to regulate their own use, right? So you gave them a framework that said, like, if you go out, if you're like, you have this much physical activity, then you can have this much screen time. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really powerful. So is one of the strategies having a way for the kids to self-regulate that, so that obviously you're monitoring it, but like, so not setting yourself up so you're like the police, the screen time police, right? But giving them the tools to be able to monitor for themselves. Is that part of it?
Absolutely. And just that schedule, or that checklist. If you do this, this, and this, then. And if you haven't drank your water for the day, or if you haven't done all these healthy things, and I'm not calling all screen time unhealthy, but our kids are just like, you let them be the moment they can. And don't get me wrong, for many parents, especially those working from home, it is easier, right? Yeah. It is needed sometimes. It is a not good for you, really good babysitter, right?
Yes.
Like I know this isn't good for them, but this is keeping them calm and I need to get this work done. Again, give yourself grace, but setting those boundaries up top, like, okay, these are going to be our tech rules for the house. This is when we're going to do this. This is how much we're going to use. This is why we shouldn't use so much. And literally, like, sometimes parents are just like, kids are just like, oh, my mom is just saying that. I am notorious for pulling out, look, science said it, and this is what they said. Losing brain cells. And, my son is just like, I badger him so much with all the gory details. He just like, fine, tell me how much I get. and we make it just a very two-way conversation about why it's good, why it's bad, why you should, why you shouldn't. And the other thing that you have to be prepared for when you do that, though, is for him to pull your coattails. So if I'm sitting binging on Instagram, like, oh, mama, and I'm like, okay, I put it down.
So one last question before we begin to wrap up. So you mentioned giving kids the parameters for using the technology. Let's talk a little bit about the what. So a lot of parents are rightfully concerned about safety online, and what their kids are watching online and what they're engaging with online. And in this time period, one of the pieces of guidance I've given folks is to your point, give yourself grace about how much screen time your kids are engaging in, but you do need to be on top of what they're actually consuming. So can you talk to a little bit about that particular point, like what people are consuming and just making sure people are safe when they're online?
So I think it's called Right Choice Media. Are you familiar with them?
I'm not. No, I don't think I've heard of them. Right Choice.
I'll be sure to add it to the comments of this.
Is it Common Sense Media?
Common Sense Media. Maybe is it Common Sense? I thought there was a Right Choice. It might be Common Sense Media. I know that is one, but it might also be Right Choice Media. I could be saying it wrong, but there are some resources out there that have guidance on like age specific family shows, what you should watch, and why. And so I think that is a very good guide for families to make their own individual choices about what their kids consume. Then also like picking or introducing your kids to shows or games that model the things that they've shown that they have interest in. So again, my son is basketball crazy. So if I can pick shows and games that are around something that I've discovered that he liked by being introspective, by doing this interest inventory or whatever, it also helps a little bit. I cannot personally say that I have like go-to shows, and I don't personally put parental controls on their devices, but I think that is because I've had very like direct conversations about the goals and values and why you're using it and how you should use it. I do know people, and I guess the other thing is, years ago, one of my aunts had like all of these blocks on her TV of things that you couldn't get to. All that did was make the kids want to get to it. So the moment they were with a friend or on a phone or they just went to go see what that was. And I saw a lot more adverse, risky, negative behaviors around the kids that had total blocks than the kids where the parameters were just, where the expectation was just set.
So I think that's really important. So for the I think it sounds like it's important for parents to be having ongoing conversations with their kids, and not so much necessarily in screen time cop role, but just as like, I just want to have a conversation as a family, like about like what we're watching and what we value. And then giving that as a tool for kids to make their own informed decisions about what they're. Is that the idea?
Absolutely. And I mean, most parents know their own child. So if you're like, that's never going to work, he needs to you put one. You know what I mean? But there's no like overarching rule. If you know your kid is going to be watching something that they should not, I still say that the conversation is a must. This is what you should watch. This is what you shouldn't watch. This is why you shouldn't watch it. When you put this sorts of things in your mind, because your mind is everything, right? Like as you think, as the man thinks, so as a kid thinks, whatever you're consuming is going to influence you in one way or the other. A kid can say, I would never do that. I was just watching it. Well, why are you watching it if you would never do it? And so just, again, opening up that dialogue and having really meaningful conversations, tying it back to your values really works. And then, just like I said, my son will check me on what I'm watching on TV. Just as a parent, I know I have family who will watch like very rated R things with the kids present because this is what they want to watch. Well, then expect that they'll watch it when you're not there. Expect that they'll emulate the behaviors that they see there. So just being mindful of that do as I say, not as I do thing, that'll work. That doesn't work anywhere, So...
Yes. I think that's so important. I like to say that you preach what you practice, not practice what you preach. Preach what you practice. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate you for being a part of this conversation for us. You've dropped so many gems. You made it so accessible for folks. I'm sure people are going to take a lot away from this. But before you go, I'm going to give you the last word, but I want to bring Carlos back. Carlos, I know that you've been busy in the background, and I also know that you're a father of 2 kids, right?
2 girls, yeah.
Yeah, and 2 young girls. So you have anything you want to share or ask about anything we've discussed so far?
I definitely have several note pages here that I've taken down. So thank you, Tiff, for all the nuggets here of knowledge that you've shared. And in alignment with just your thought process around open discussion around expectations. And, it's so interesting because we had an earlier show when we first started these conversations around tech distraction, and we really geared it around what that meant for us as adults and working professionals and whatnot, right? But this conversation today brings it full circle to the entirety of the household, right? And just bringing it to the kids and ensuring that whether it's tech distraction or just screen time, whatever we want to call it, for them is equally as important. And so being able to have that dialogue and being able to have the strategy around what's good use of tech is very key. I went ahead and put, again, as mentioned, I've taken down a lot of notes. So again, thank you for your knowledge. I put that request in for that Write Your Own Story workbook for my 10-year-old who loves to write, right? And always finding what they're interested in. To your point, right? Like if your kid loves basketball, find him that MJ on ESPN to watch that series, right? Why not write a story about that, right? Like anyway, so there's a lot of integration between creative thought process and the use of tech. So thank you for your thoughts today.
No, I'm glad it was helpful.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Carlos. So I'm going to give you the last word, Tiffany, so that we've talked about had a wide range of conversation about play and screen time, particularly for kids in this current environment. We may have to have you come back and talk about play for adults specifically. But any last words, any pearls of wisdom you want to leave with the audience before we go?
I think just give yourself grace and allow kids to talk open and freely and feel the full range of emotions. And that is really the best way forward, so that you know what they're thinking, what their interests are, and how you can best be your child's ally.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. So for the folks that are joining us, I want to thank you for joining us. And I invite you to like, to love, to share this conversation, to comment a friend, a parent, a caregiver that could use the advice that Tiffany has shared with us so graciously today. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.